Good morning and welcome to the Peorian. I'm your host, Paul Gordon. West of Peoria, by just a few miles, is some of this state's most beautiful land. Land that houses some of Illinois' most fascinating native wildlife. Now in its 35th year, Wildlife Prairie Park still strives to keep to the mission of its founder, the late Bill Rutherford. That mission is to promote conservation, education, and recreation. Any day of the week, visitors to the park can see bison, black bears, bobcats, cougars, elk, birds of prey, and several others in their natural habitat, or at least what that habitat was when they freely roamed central Illinois. In an effort to maintain that mission, the park was deeded to the state in 2000, but now, because of the state's funding woes, it is returning to private ownership. A group called Friends of Wildlife Prairie Park operates the park today and soon will take ownership once the Illinois General Assembly approves the move. My guest today is Bill Cirone, the new president of Friends of Wildlife Prairie Park, and we'll discuss the park and how it will survive under private ownership when we come back. Welcome back to the Peorian. I'm with Bill Cirone, president of Friends of Wildlife Prairie Park. Thank you for coming today, Bill.
You bet. Thank you for the opportunity.
What we're talking about is the ownership of Wildlife Prairie Park. What's the status of the legislation pending before the General Assembly?
It's a great question, Paul. Currently, the legislation, which is attached to, it's an amendment attached to House Bill 3611, is in the Rules Committee at this point of the House.
Okay.
We were very, very successful in writing an effective amendment, and I owe that all to our area legislators who have had great collaboration on that whole piece. And Senator Kaler introduced it in the Senate because that's where the bill was. And it passed 53-0 at that point in time.
That's great.
It was fabulous. And as it passed on into the House, it was up for review in the rules at that point in time. And it was towards the end of the General Assembly, so rules had some concerns up with the bill in terms of possibly the valuation of the park and making sure that we had the right valuation, just doing their due diligence. So it was never able to come out of the general or make it onto the House floor for vote at that point. It's still in rules. But I can tell you this, that we're all very, very confident that it will be back on the House floor in the veto session, and it will come out of rules. We're working on our due diligence right now in terms of making sure that we do the valuation of the property, the commercial valuation of the property properly at this point in time, so that it can make it onto the House floor. And we believe that we have great support on the House floor, and we know it has to be 3/5 because it comes out through the veto session. But if it comes out, then there's some diligence that Friends needs to do at this point with DNR. The DNR has been extremely supportive. And then it would go to the governor's desk for signature. And effectively, upon his signature, the park would come back to Friends, and Friends, which is a registered 501c in the state of Illinois, not for profit, would have ownership of the park.
Why is this even happening?
It's a great question. We have a 2,000-acre park at this point in time that the state has owned since September of 2000. And the park has, in a collaboration with the state, when Forest Park Foundation deeded the park to the state of Illinois, they were to be a partner. Forest Park Foundation was the operator of the park, and the state of Illinois, through IDNR, was the partner that was to help with the capital improvements.
Okay.
They were to help with any of the financial shortfalls at that point, provide employment, provide leadership, provide stability, along with the operator of Forest Park Foundation. Provide the necessary improvements to whether it's the animal husbandry side or whether it's the buildings or the infrastructure. And over the years, as the state of Illinois has just been compressed with trying to meet all of the economic demands of the state, there's been less and less investment in the park. So you have, at this point, you have the state of Illinois, and particularly IDNR, operating over 50,000 acres of public ground and on a $765 million budget, including payroll and everything else. So that's hardly an advantage at this point for a park like ours that needs financial assistance. So in 2009, basically, financial assistance ceased from the state of Illinois. So Forest Park Foundation said, we're in a very tough place, and that's when Friends was formed at that point to see if we couldn't help operate effectively and efficiently and also build that relationship with the state of Illinois to see how we partner better. And it's in that discovery as we started to work with the state of Illinois that we figured out that yes, they want to be a partner, but they're financially have a lot of other needs at this point to take care of. And so they weren't going to be able to be a financial partner. So we were going to have to figure out on our own how to build a budget and how to operate the park and then figure out what would be the long-term steps. And I think the long-term steps then become involving our legislators and involving part of our community thinkers and involving the state and saying, is there a way that we should just probably bring the park back into the community domain so that we can gain the investment and the ability to start to meet some of the capital needs? And so that's why we're where we are.
Okay. When we come back, we're going to talk more about Friends of Wildlife Prairie Park's plans for the park, including how they will keep it going without the state's help. Stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm with Bill Cirone, president of the Friends of Wildlife Prairie Park. Bill, what do the Friends of Wildlife Prairie Park intend to do to keep the park going as a private enterprise?
Great question, Paul. The first one is to try to maintain financial solvency. Mm-hmm. That's first and foremost. The Friends Board are made up of business people in the community and academic in the community who are highly engaged in making sure that we remain solvent. So this last year, we've actually, although we operated in the red, we operated with our red at a minimum. So it's probably one of the best years of financial performance. We have to continue. If you can consider a loss good, it's a minimal loss at this point in time. But just put it in perspective, we need about $1.5 million a year of revenue.
Okay.
And we'll operate at about 1.1 million, a little over 1.1 million. So it's about a $260,000 loss. But now you couple that to the programs that we're able to demonstrate to investors, whether it's foundations at this point, or folks that are willing to invest, or folks that are looking for a specific project, or just unrestricted gifts, and they can see the commitment of the financial management process, then their funds at that point help us to actually have a positive cash flow at the end of the year at that point through being able to touch some of those restricted grants and some of those unrestricted grants at that point. Okay. That's short term. Second piece in short term is that we know that we've got to continue to invest not only in special events, we've got to invest in programs that are about education, and we've got to continue to increase our membership drive and also our admissions at this point. So it's just a matter of the blocking and tackling that goes with that, coupled to figuring out how we continue to engage our board with the correct long-term strategic management processes, business plans that we have in committee at this point in time, our human resources at this point, and our operations committees that are all looking at efficient ways and effective ways and then long-term ways in order to continue to excite and entice and bring in new patrons into the park at this point. So there's a very, very focused budget process and strategic management plan process that we're working ourselves through in order to A, take care of short-term financial needs, but then build a park that can be there for the long-term future. I liken it to, we're trying to build the Yellowstone of the Midwest, and we can in fact get that done with the ecosystem that we have there.
How long will that take?
Well, that park has been there a lot longer than probably any of us are going to be around at this point in time. I mean, if you want to look at it in terms of just time, if you look at the heritage of how many people have walked that land, how many people have worked that land, the growth of the trees, the development of the animal system and so forth out there, we believe that we can, if we're able to get the park back from the state of Illinois, it'll always remain in public domain because of the restrictions that are on the land. We believe that we can excite the community fairly quickly in terms of investment, and I would say that we're looking at 2 to 4 years at this point in order to have a clear tracking out there, but probably within a year that you'll start to see developments in terms of the change of some of the preservation of the facilities, the change in some of the animal husbandry, the change in some of the programming. So we're working at that every day, but we're working at it with limited funds. Once we're able to gain the capital investment that we need, then speed will come with the dollars.
Okay. We're going to take a break right now for a word from our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to discuss the organization, Friends of Wildlife Prairie Park. But first, here is our own Kevin Kaiser to tell us what's happening in the literary world.
Hey, it's July here in Central Illinois and most places across the United States, which means we're roughly halfway through 2012. Since we're at the midpoint, I thought I'd review the books I've read in the first half of the year. And since I've read 25 books at this point and only get about 2 minutes on this stinking show, the reviews are going to have to be really short. In fact, I'm shooting for the shortest reviews ever, so here we go. An American Betrayal, Cherokee Patriots and the Trail of Tears, Manifest Destiny as a Bad Mother. Solar by Ian McEwan, brilliant new novel by one of the great British novelists. Letters to a Young Contrarian by Christopher Hitchens, a book everyone should read by age 25. Journals, early 50s and 60s by Allen Ginsberg, a behind-the-scenes look at the Beat Generation and the cultural awakening of the 60s. Freedom Summer by Sally Belfridge, a seminal work on the campaign to register black voters in the South in the 60s. Hitler Was My Friend by Heinrich Hoffmann, an astonishing look at Hitler by the official state photographer for Germany. Ghost on the Throne, The Death of Alexander the Great, which showed how the civilized world lost its civilized mind. Vanished Kingdoms, which tells the story of little-known and long-vanished kingdoms in Europe. The Shadow of a Great Rock by legend Harold Bloom, which shows a literary appreciation for the King James Bible. The Sound and the Fury by Faulkner, one of my favorite books and one I reread every year. Hunger by Newt Hampson, a classic said to have influenced Dostoevsky and ushered in a new era of fiction. Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. Whitman is and was America's poet, and every home should have a copy of Leaves of Grass. Da Vinci's Ghost, which charts Leonardo's influence from his time to the modern day. Oh My Gods, an engaging retelling of Greek and Roman myths. One and Only, the untold story of On the Road, which tells the story of the other person who went on the road with Neil Cassidy and Jack Kerouac. One Matchless Time, A Life of William Faulkner, an engaging bio on perhaps my favorite author. James Madison and the Making of America, which I reviewed on the Peorian website. No One Left to Lie To, The Values of the Worst Family by Christopher Hitchens. Old Hitch has the Clintons in his sights in this book. The Legacy of David Foster Wallace, which takes a critical look at the brilliant author and Central Illinois native. Bleak House by Dickens, which is an epic and considered Dickens' masterpiece. Bring Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel, which is a brilliant follow-up to her equally brilliant Wolf Hall. The Years of Lyndon Johnson, The Passage of Power by Robert Caro. This is the third part in Caro's four-part series on LBJ, and it was just published. The President's Club, Inside the World's Most Exclusive Fraternity, which is a fascinating look at the relationships between ex-presidents. And finally, Free Will by Sam Harris, a book that demonstrates the flaw in the concept of free will. So there you go, 25 books I've read in the first half of 2012. I need to get out more. So check out the entire list in the literary section of thepurian.com.
I'm back talking with Bill Cirone of Friends of Wildlife Prairie Park. Bill, I want to talk about the organization itself. It formed a number of years ago for the direct purpose of working with the state, correct? On
Right.
running the park?
Right.
Okay.
Let me give you just a brief history on that. Bill and Hazel Rutherford assembled the park in basically the land pieces in the 70s. And it was deeded under the Forest Park Foundation, and it's resounded in the Forest Park Foundation until 2000.
Okay.
The land at that point, and this was a very smart process of Forest Park Foundation and the board and the thinkers at that point said, look, let's deed the park to the state of Illinois. They deeded it in September, sometime in 2000, early 2000, to about 2,000 acres at that point in time. So that's the way it operated, with Forest Park Foundation operating and the partner being state of Illinois, up through the beginning of 2010, when Forest Park Foundation said, you know what, we don't have a stable partner here, and we've got a partner that has got other thoughts, and our own migration is possible towards other ventures too. So the Friends Board was put together. And the Friends Board really is a spinoff of Forest Park Foundation park members, board members at that point in time, interested business community members, people that have a strong passion for conservation, for education, for recreation, for land stewardship, and also who knew that we had a landmass out here, an ecosystem that could in fact be developed for the long-term future. So that's really the board. And they put together the not-for-profit in 2010 and said to Forest Park Foundation, let's put an operating agreement together and we will operate the park. So that, in trying, without having to make it much longer than that, I think that probably gets us to where we are. And that the board members for Friends are still highly engaged. It hasn't changed at all. In fact, we probably have more energy and passion and commitment today than at the beginning in 2010, because we see the opportunity and we see the progression of events that we have with the park coming back into the community to own and operate.
Does the board pick its own members then?
The board has the ability to pick its own members, yes, but the board also welcomes those people that want to be engaged. The key word is engaged. The park needs a lot of help. So the expertise that board members have needs to come to the table, not only to guide management, but to also help in some of the due processes.
Okay. How transparent will Friends of Wildlife Prairie Park be once it takes over?
That's a great question. I'm a student of open book management myself in my own organization. Okay. So we want to be totally open book at that point. We want to make sure that we reach out to the public, A, for their involvement, B, for their ideas. Paul, the restricted deeds keep this park in the public domain. We want it to serve the public, and we want it to continue to have the ability to draw into the central Illinois area, just like the zoo, just like our new museum. We want this to be an attraction too that continues to bring people to the central Illinois area and realize it as a destination. So we will be very, very open and transparent.
Given the makeup of the board, how confident are you as president of the Friends that the park's future is good, is bright?
when you see the collaboration that we have between legislators, when you see the articles that have been done that look for that validate, when you look at the energy and the ideas of the board members at this point in time, you see the Old English Fair that we just went through and the gala event where we had so much community engagement. And when you look at the history of all of the people that have been through the park, I'm very confident that it's just a matter of time before we assemble and get the right processes and program out there for our community.
Thank you, Bill.
You bet.
I hope you've enjoyed today's program and that you're ready to visit that park and support it. It needs you and it needs all of us. Remember, you can see this and previous episodes of The Peorian on our website, thepeorian.com. And tune in next week when we talk about an upcoming event that is meant to increase awareness about a very serious problem facing families everywhere. That will be at 8 a.m. next Sunday on WHOI TV and on our website. Have a good week.
Ooh.